Another year, another mediocre Call of Duty campaign, and we are going to be reviewing it. And this time on the chopping block is Call of Duty Black Ops 6, and I am proud to say that Call of Duty Black Ops 6 might just be the absolute worst Call of Duty campaign I have ever possibly played, even worse than Modern Warfare 3 2023. Yes, that is how much I disliked this campaign, because from start to finish, I did not have fun with this thing at all. I was almost immediately bored upon starting it, and the game just never got good. The pacing was all over the place, and borderline came to a crawl way too many times for a Call of Duty campaign, and way too many times for a campaign that short. On top of that, the story is completely nonsensical and doesn't even take advantage of the entire premise, which is the setting of the Gulf War time period. And while the marketing material might have you believe that this is going to be a central theme of the story and the events that take place in the game, we have a scenario where literally this game could take place at any point in human history and it would not have any sort of significant effect on the plot whatsoever. The Gulf War is an afterthought at best in the context of Call of Duty Black Ops 6, and that's still probably being a little bit generous to call it an afterthought, because it barely has any sort of importance into the plot, and you can tell that it was just shoehorned in there in order to market the story effectively by drawing on people's memories and, I guess, familiarity with the conflict itself. Because I think only like maybe 20 to 30% of the campaign actually takes place in what you would consider to be a Gulf War setting anyway. So, and the missions that you're playing there don't really have too much importance on the story at all either. It's just kind of like, oh, well, yeah, we kind of have to include these in the game because we kind of promised that it was going to center around the Gulf War itself. So that, I think, is also a massive mistake, because they didn't even utilize the setting effectively, which has always been one of the biggest strengths, I feel like, of Call of Duty campaigns. But overall, man, this game was an absolute slog to sit through. I really did not enjoy it, aside from a few missions here and there. The majority of it was absolutely awful. There's a lot of issues I have with this game. I'm not going to get into spoilers in this specific section. We will do that when we get to the actual story breakdown, but there is a very weird, like almost borderline supernatural theme that happens in this game, and I don't really know how to put it without spoiling it for the people who do care. We'll talk about it when we do get to the story analysis section, but let's just say your typical suspension of disbelief in Call of Duty campaigns is ramped up to the absolute max and beyond what is acceptable, I feel like, for the rule of cool in video games. But we'll get to that when we actually get to the story analysis. I don't want to spoil it for people if they don't want to be spoiled and want to experience it for themselves. So I think that's enough of an intro. You know, TLDR, obviously I'm not a fan, but we'll go ahead and break this down, man. So I think first up, let's go ahead and talk about some of the issues I encountered while attempting to play the campaign for Call of Duty Black Ops 6. So before we get into some specific issues surrounding Black Ops 6, I do want to talk about the Call of Duty HQ experience on PC, because this is absolutely horrible, man. I mean, I know it's like a common thing, but I feel like it's worth noting because, dude, this shit is fucking wild that it's still this bad. So when I downloaded Call of Duty Black Ops 6 earlier today, I downloaded COD HQ and all the files for Black Ops 6, had it all preloaded. I did the shaders through Call of Duty HQ, and when it was time to actually launch Black Ops 6, and imagine my shock, I had to do another batch of shaders for the campaign, and this time it took 25 minutes. I opened Black Ops 6 at 11:57 and was finally able to start playing the campaign at 12:22. Man, that is absolutely insane that it took that long to compile fucking shaders. But on top of that, I noticed something when I finished finished the campaign and wanted to go try out the multiplayer, there is still this thing going on with COD HQ, which is the most obnoxious shit ever, where if you want to switch game modes basically between like single player, multiplayer, and zombies, for example, you have to quit the entire game and relaunch it as a brand new executable on your computer. And there is a problem currently on Black Ops 6 where every single time the game restarts on your computer, certain graphical settings, certain game settings, control settings, just various different things get reset, and you have to change those settings every single time the game restarts. Now, this will probably be fixed by a patch, but it's something that I noticed, and it's something I had an issue with that was very annoying and took away from my experience because, you know, I had just played through the campaign. I had all my settings set up control-wise and graphical settings, you name it. And then when I went to multiplayer, I discovered that a lot of that stuff had been reset because in order to get from campaign to multiplayer, you have to quit out of the game and relaunch the multiplayer mode because it's way too hard in 2024 to just have a game with multiple different options in one menu. I mean, you know, they only managed to do that shit back on the PlayStation 2 and Xbox 360, but in current fucking day on PC, it's impossible to do such a thing, apparently. But yeah, COD HQ is absolute dog shit. That is nothing new, and it's something I just wanted to note because it continues to piss me off personally. Now, in playing the campaign of Black Ops 6, I noticed for the most part the game performed well. I didn't really notice too many major frame dips. There were some areas and specific parts of levels where the frame rate definitely did plummet pretty dramatically, but for the most part, I want to say the game looks and runs pretty good on PC, at least in my experience. There are some very weird visual effects, like especially with hair and especially the body hair in this game, where it looks really low res and blurry. And keep in mind, I had the game completely maxed out graphically, so I don't know what exactly the cause was, but there was like some visual jank here and there, but nothing that really took you out of the experience. I did also encounter another visual issue when it came to like smoke, fog, or the gas coming out of various things in the environment, which made everything look really pixelated around it. What the fuck? Dude, look at the visual effects right there. What the hell? And in addition to this, I did encounter some various what I would consider to be game-breaking bugs in one particular mission especially, which was the snow stealth mission, which we'll get into later. But yeah, there were several times where I was unable to complete objectives, where I would get stuck behind a door and unable to get out, and I would like phase through the wall. It's just, bro, there was a lot of issues with that one particular level especially, but there were several times throughout the game that I encountered instances where I was unable to actually progress, and I had to reload the last checkpoint. Luckily, that wasn't the biggest deal in the world, but it's still aggravating in those moments, especially when you get through a stealth segment and you have to redo that part. But aside from those issues, I think the game for the most part runs pretty well. I don't really have anything else to add on top of that. I don't think you're getting a broken game here by any stretch of the imagination. Are there areas that it could definitely be improved upon? Absolutely, but that's pretty much every game out there, and I don't really think this game does anything too egregious from a technical or bugs and glitches perspective that I guess warrants alarm. Now, I did not play the console version of this. I only played it on PC, so I cannot speak to the PlayStation or Xbox version of this game, but for the most part, man, it definitely is one of the better games in terms of polish compared to most AAA releases nowadays, all things considered. So I don't really think you need to sound the alarm bell and freak out over this game being a buggy, broken pile of shit. It definitely is not that in this particular case. So now that we have those issues out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to arguably the most important part of Call of Duty, and that of course is the gameplay. I don't really think we need much explanation here. If you have played any Call of Duty game since Modern Warfare 2019, you have a very good idea of how this game feels to play in motion. It is that classic Call of Duty feel with that revamped engine of Modern Warfare 2019 that personally I really like a lot. So if you're familiar with that, that is exactly what Black Ops 6 feels like. I would say overall, I don't think it needs to be changed or tweaked. I think it's damn near perfection. So many games have tried to emulate the combat feel of Call of Duty and the overall gunplay to very little success. The only game that's ever come close is Titanfall, and that's because it's made by the people who literally made Call of Duty in the first place, so that makes sense. But so many have tried and so many have failed. Call of Duty truly has a one-of-a-kind gameplay experience that makes it, in my opinion, first in class when it comes to just the overall feel of gunplay, which I absolutely love. So that is present in Black Ops 6, back and better than ever. I don't think anyone will dispute that the gunplay of Black Ops 6 feels absolutely fantastic. Now, they did add the new Omni movement system into Black Ops 6, and I'm gonna be honest, I really did not have a need for this in the campaign itself. I found that just sliding to cover every once in a while was more than adequate, because the way this game works, you don't really have much health at all in Black Ops 6. You die very, very, very quickly, even on lower difficulties. So what you're gonna do is find a piece of cover most of the time and stick to it. You're not really gonna be moving around too much, so I didn't really get a chance to fling myself around the environment too much and take advantage of the Omni movement system. But it is a new addition to the game that's definitely available to you if you do want to utilize it. But overall, this is a very familiar feel if you've played any Call of Duty since Modern Warfare 2019. And of course, with that comes the positives and negatives. We kind of already touched on the positives, but the negatives, of course, being you have extremely high health on enemies to the point where they feel like literal bullet sponges. I don't know what dumbass got it in their bright mind over at Activision to put armored enemy types into Call of Duty campaigns, but they are back and worse than ever before, in my opinion. They are just downright obnoxious in this game because they added a new type of armored enemy that has these gas grenades, and the gas grenades will damage you, stun you in place, and make it so you can't really aim at all whatsoever. Like, you're completely frozen. You can't even go prone half the time when you get hit with these gas grenades. So you die very, very quickly. And the guys that throw these gas grenades have 2 armored health bars, which if you're using a sniper rifle, it will take 2 to 3 shots at minimum to kill them with a sniper rifle. Like, the amount of health these armored enemies have is just a little bit too much, man. Like, it gets to the point where it's annoying. If you're using an SMG, you're gonna have to put in at least 2 magazines into one person to kill them. It is obnoxious, especially when they throw a bunch of them at you at once, which is a very common theme, especially about halfway through the game. And then you have the minigun enemy type who has 4 armor health bars, and it feels like they can mow you down in like a split second if you catch that minigun fire wrong. So they are an absolute menace, and they take a very, very long time to actually drain their health bar, and you will oftentimes run out of ammo entirely trying to defeat one of them. So you're constantly scrambling around the environment trying to find like some ammo pickups or a new weapon or maybe some explosives to throw at them. But explosives, I found, are very ineffective against most of the armored enemies unless it's like a direct C4 hit or you can chain it with an explosive barrel. But typically one explosion by itself really doesn't do all that much to help you out. Now, there is one more new, I guess, armored enemy type in this game, and it is an armored enemy type that uses like miniature RCXDs, and they will absolutely spam them like no tomorrow, bro. I mean, here's a clip, and you know, I'm not exactly the most calm I've ever been, but bro, I was genuinely getting pissed off at these things. Yeah, they use little fucking RCXD spam on a fucking plane with no cover. It's so fucking fun. It's so much fun, man.
But gosh dang it, I've had so much fun playing it.
Well, I guess Raven technically made it, but it's still their game. Oh, look, a fucking armored enemy. Spamming RCXDs. Armored enemies spamming RCXDs, bro. You really can't make this shit up.
Santa brought some toys.
All clear. No sign of Gusev yet.
What a fucking... Dude, this is just miserable.
Clear.
Yeah, so as you could tell, those were a lot of fun to deal with, man, and they were always in the worst places possible. But it gets even better because there's another armored enemy type in this game that has 2 bars of armored health, and it is the armored riot shield troopers. Now, these motherfuckers have the best riot shields in all of human history because it is almost impossible to hit them when they have their shield up. Like, you have this tiny little sliver on their right arm that you can hit, and maybe if you're lucky you can hit their feet enough to stagger them when they're moving around. But overall, man, these like riot shields are the hardest I have ever seen to flank. It is almost impossible to kill them even with explosives. I've chucked 4 grenades at their feet and it doesn't even put a dent in them. So these motherfuckers are absolutely tough. And to make it even worse, when you do finally get to engage one of them, they have an RPG that they can fire while their riot shield is fully deployed and protecting them. So they can literally shoot you with an RPG every 5 seconds while their riot shield is raised. So you don't even get like a little window between where they lower their riot shield and fire an RPG. No, they will just straight up have their shield up the entire time and spam RPGs at you. And a lot of times it's not just one of these that spawns. It's like 2, 3, sometimes 4, and it is absolute fucking hell to deal with, man. I would not wish that shit on my worst fucking enemy. But yeah, the armored enemies in this game are just downright annoying. I wish they would just get rid of them out of Call of Duty. They do not add anything to the experience other than frustration, and personally, I absolutely fucking despise bullet sponge enemies, especially in a game like COD, where that has never been the point. It's always been about fast-paced, high kill count type combat. So I get they're trying to funnel people into Warzone and get them used to the idea of body armor and all that type of shit, but it's Call of Duty, people. We don't need that type of shit in the campaign. I understand the campaign is basically baby's first Warzone match, and it's to introduce all the new little normies into the Warzone mechanics and everything like that, but at a certain point, it's just too much, and this is a prime example because even on easy difficulty, these motherfuckers just absolutely are a pain in the ass to deal with, and they do not add anything to the experience other than frustration. Now, speaking of high health enemy types, I'm not going to go into details here, but there are several boss fights in this game. Yes, boss fights in the Call of Duty game, and they are beyond fucking tanky, if you ask me, to the point where I genuinely dreaded having to engage with any of them. So I will not detail the boss fights here because I'm not going to spoil people if they don't want those spoilers. When we get to the story analysis part, I will talk about them in more detail. But yeah, the boss fights are bullet sponge city in this game 100%, and they are not fun. I did not enjoy a single boss fight in this game. They felt super unnecessary. They felt extremely out of place, and it just left me wondering, what the fuck am I playing? I thought I was playing a Call of Duty title. Now, a few other things I do want to touch on is the overall pacing of the campaign. I would describe it as extremely slow paced for a number of reasons. The first being, in between every single mission, you have this kind of walk and talk segment where you go back to your home base and you have an opportunity to engage in the base building mechanics of the game, where in the missions you can collect cash stacks and basically use that to upgrade your fortifications and buy like weapons and upgrades and just different things for your home base. It's really unnecessary. I did not engage with the mechanic really at all personally, but yeah, in between every single mission you have like 5 to 10 minutes of like forced dialogue before you can select the next mission. So that brings the pacing to a grinding halt in an already slow paced game, because about 4 or 5 of the actual campaign missions out of the 11 literally have like 20 to 30 minutes each of zero guns. You will not fire a single bullet in 4 to 5 of these missions for like 20 to 30 minutes each, because it either involves you walking around one of Bill Clinton's campaign events with a camera, you're going to be infiltrating an enemy base and you cannot use your gun whatsoever. You can use stealth takedowns, but that's actually heavily discouraged. You're just supposed to talk to the people inside of the base. There's another one where you're walking around a casino, and then there are these 1 or 2 kind of missions where it's what I would describe as a schizo fit, and it gets heavy into spoilers, so I'm not going to discuss that. But yeah, there is a ton of just walk and talk segments in this game where you will be doing very little combat, and it takes up a very substantial portion of the campaign. It's not just one mission every once in a while. It's about 40% of the game has zero combat whatsoever in it. So the pacing is already very slow, and then when you add in that 5 to 10 minute break in between every single mission on top of the cutscenes, which are very, very abundant in this, so don't you worry, all you cutscene fans out there. But yeah, the pacing to this game is one of the slowest I have ever seen in a Call of Duty game, and you never really get that rush with a lot of these missions. Like, the set pieces in this game are very mediocre at best. They feel like just little random events that would pop up in the older Call of Duty games. There's nothing really grand in scope. It feels very lacking, especially in the Black Ops series compared to Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2. But yeah, the pacing of this game is all over the fucking place. Now, there are a few good missions, like for example, the airport mission where you get to drive a tank is really fucking cool. I thought that was a great mission personally. The pacing on that was pretty good, aside from the massive amount of armored enemy types and then that awful plane sequence with the RCXD spam that I showed you earlier. But yeah, for the most part, this game has some major pacing issues, and for a 6-hour campaign, it really should not have that many grinding halts that it does, because it just makes the game feel unnecessarily long, when in reality, it's not even long in the first place. And I think another big issue with the pacing is the over-reliance on stealth. I would say the majority of the missions in this game are almost entirely stealth-based, or have a very large portion of which you are encouraged to remain in stealth. So 1 or 2 stealth missions is perfectly fine in the Call of Duty campaign. I actually like the old Call of Duty campaign stealth missions back in the day on the 360, but I don't like these new ones where you basically have to stay in stealth for like 20 to 30 minutes in a lot of cases, doing shit like hacking a computer terminal, picking locks, and things like that. It doesn't fit with Call of Duty. It would be fine if it was like 1 or 2 missions, but when the majority of the missions in the game revolve around that exact same gameplay loop, I think it's a problem, and it does hurt the pacing a lot, because we're playing Call of Duty here. We're not playing Dishonored. One more thing I do want to bring up as well, since we're kind of on topic, is when I mentioned the tank mission where you get to drive the tank, there's very few sequences in this game where you get to directly control a vehicle. That's like the only one I can think of. Every other time you're riding passenger. Like when you're on the dirt bikes, you have to ride bitch. When you're in the chopper gunner, yeah, you get to hold down the trigger for, 30 seconds to a minute and light up a few guys here and there, but you never actually get direct control over a helicopter. You do get to drive the tank, but it's very short-lived. It lasts about 2 to 3 minutes, and that's about it. So overall, I really feel like another shortcoming of this campaign is there's no like dedicated vehicle mission, like an AC-130 mission, or maybe a Predator missile mission, or maybe an attack helicopter, but like something just to spice it up a little bit and throw something in there to kind of keep it fresh and something new. I mean, it's fine if you don't want to have like a dedicated mission to it and just have it more sprinkled in throughout the campaign, but they are few and far between, and it was really something I was missing, and I think would have gone a long way to help improve the campaign personally. And then one last thing I did want to touch on before we move on here from the gameplay itself is there is another Ubisoft-esque kind of, I guess, Warzone open world style level where you have to destroy these 3, I guess, missile launch sites, and basically each of the missile launch sites takes about maybe a minute to clear out and plant the explosives, but it takes several minutes to drive from one to the other to the other. So that to me will never be a good mission structure. Now, I am glad that there was only one of them this time around versus Modern Warfare 3, which had several. So it is an improvement that they are getting rid of that formula, but I would say that this is a much more egregious example of what that looked like, because because you are literally driving through a barren desert with almost nothing to do other than like a couple little extra spots where you can kill 2 or 3 enemies that have spawned. So yeah, it was very desolate, very unnecessary, and literally created for padding purposes alone. So again, it was only one example, so I will cut them a little bit of slack, but I absolutely cannot stand that design. I miss the days of Call of Duty just being a non-stop action game with a linear path and constant set pieces, but I guess that's too much to ask for in the modern gaming landscape. But that is going to do it for all of my gameplay related topics, so I guess we can go ahead and move on over to the story. Now, I figured I would do a TLDR / non-spoiler section here up front, so if you want my thoughts on the story, you can get that, and I will try my best to not give away any sort of spoilers whatsoever, and just give you my general thoughts on the story itself, so if you want to go experience it for yourself, you will not be spoiled, and I will do my best, I promise. But overall, I think the story is a complete and total clusterfuck. It doesn't even feel like a Call of Duty game a lot of times, just how out of place things feel. The entire Gulf War concept that this game has been marketed off of is barely even an afterthought in this situation, because you literally have like, I think 3 missions in a Gulf War setting out of 11, and all of the Gulf War missions really don't play any sort of important story role whatsoever. They're kind of just there to remind you like, hey, the Gulf War is going on at the same time, all this other shit's going down, but the 2 events aren't really that connected. So yeah, it's definitely kind of a bait and switch, I feel like, in that particular circumstance. So if you're looking for a Gulf War story, you're not getting that here. So just already prepare yourself to be disappointed. I think personally that was disappointing to me because the direction they did take the story in was just completely nonsensical, man, and it borderlines on like a fantasy / science fiction style story the longer it goes on, and you start seeing shit that you would think would belong in the likes of something like Atomic Heart or BioShock Infinite, for example. So without giving away too many details, it feels like it's trying to be a bunch of different games in the first-person shooter genre at once, instead of focusing on what made Call of Duty, and by adding all these different aspects to the Call of Duty experience, instead of making it a more robust and exciting experience, in my opinion, it actually works against the campaign and makes it a lot less enjoyable, at least from my perspective and what I look for in a Call of Duty campaign. I mean, the most basic way I can put it, guys, is go play this campaign and then go play the campaign for Black Ops 1, and then tell me which one you had more fun playing. And I guarantee you the answer 9 times out of 10, if not 10 out of 10 times, will be Black Ops 1. It has better pacing, better set pieces, more memorable missions, and just overall a much more interesting plot. The story of Black Ops 6 is completely just fucked. That's the best way I could put it, man. It is absolutely crazy. You will have no idea what the hell's going on half the time. Like, a lot of it just doesn't even make any sense, and by the end of it, you're just like, why the fuck was this a game? But anyway, you'll see if you play it. I don't want to spoil too much, but that is basically my thoughts on the story. I think it is an absolute dumpster fire, one of the worst, if not the worst, Call of Duty storyline I have ever seen in a mainline campaign entry. But yeah, I guess, you know, different strokes for different folks. I saw that IGN gave it a 9 out of 10, but keep in mind that IGN is also the outlet that claimed that they wished that Modern Warfare had a non-lethal option, so they probably love the fact that this campaign has a ton of missions where that actually is a viable option. So keep that in mind, man. They don't want to kill people in Call of Duty, so I guess it kind of makes sense that in a game where half the missions basically involve non-lethal options, they might be pretty big fans of that. But for me personally, bro, it did not land whatsoever, and this is definitely up there for me as one of the worst Call of Duty storylines of all time. So now that we've established that, let's go ahead and move on to the actual, I guess, mission by mission analysis, and I'll give you guys my thoughts on each one of those. So the first mission of Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is called Bishop Takes Rook, and this serves as like the intro mission to the Black Ops 6 campaign. It's about 20 minutes long, about 5 of which are actually spent playing it, and the other 15 minutes are spent watching it. Now, granted, it is an intro mission, so I'm not going to be 100% a stickler for not being able to play 75% of it, but this is not a trend in traditional Call of Duty campaigns. So already we kind of get a taste for the pacing. Now, in this mission, you have to track down and capture a terrorist. You chase him through the mission. When you finally capture him, Adler shows up and shoots him in the head just out of nowhere and then gets arrested by the CIA. So not really much to say about this mission. You know, it's kind of just the setup for the story, so whatever. After this mission, you play one called Blood Feud, which this is really just a worthless mission, and it basically purely exists to introduce you into one of the main characters of the game, which is the Camel Toe Harris lookalike character.
Invoca a lupo.
Yeah, she's a total fucking boss bitch, and basically you're helping her out, track down, and like take out this crime family, essentially. I mean, this is actually a pretty decent mission. Like, I didn't really mind it. It's a pretty standard linear shoot everything in front of you style Call of Duty mission, so for the most part, I actually like this mission, so that's definitely a nice change of pace from the first one, but overall, it just didn't really feel that necessary other than to introduce Sev into the story, which is the name of the woman. I just remembered it. This mission was fine, not really anything to write home about though. So after that was Most Wanted, and this basically is the mission that you've probably seen in the advertising for this game that takes place at the Bill Clinton governor campaign rally event or whatever. And essentially this mission has you walking around for 15 to 20 minutes, not shooting people, but shooting pictures of people with your camera, because you need to infiltrate the CIA black site. So in order to do so, you need the retina scan of a US senator. So you have to go around this event, and there are 3 different tasks you can do. You complete one of the 3 tasks. It allows you to get a picture with the senator. You scan his eye, and then you go underneath the facility, which has located underneath it a CIA black site where Adler is being held. And when you get down there, you find out that this group called Pantheon, which is like, I guess, a bunch of rogue CIA agents or whatever. They don't really do a great job of explaining it, to be honest. Maybe they talk about it in Cold War or something. I have no clue, but basically it seems like it's a bunch of rogue, like counter CIA agents, basically. And they had already infiltrated the facility and had killed most everyone inside. So you have to go in and take out the Pantheon people in order to get Adler before they do. So you fight your way through, you get Adler, you fight your way back out, and it starts the chain of events of the story. But yeah, overall, this mission was an absolute slog, man. The 20 plus minutes that you have to spend playing stealth with your camera at the campaign event is absolutely miserable. And on top of that, you don't even get to see Hillary Clinton once in the entire campaign, man. So definitely not worth it. Now, after that is a mission called Hunting Season, and this is by far the worst non-walking simulator level in the game. And this is essentially the Ubisoft open world copy-paste type mission where you basically have 3 different objectives. You spawn in the middle of the map, and each objective is in a different corner of the map. So you have to get in your car and drive like 1,000+ meters in between the objectives, which pads out the runtime by like 2 to 3 minutes in between each objective. It takes about maybe 30 seconds to actually do the objective once you get there, but it's basically just spaced out for the sole purpose of padding. So this mission was extremely poorly designed. It reminded me of the worst missions of Modern Warfare 3, but even more desolate, and that's saying something. So yeah, I'm glad this was the only mission really like this, but it did not need to be in the game, and it added absolutely nothing to it. It's one of those missions that they kind of shoehorned into the game to make you feel like you're actually playing a Gulf War, you know, game, because the Gulf War really has nothing to do with the storyline of this game whatsoever. But there's a couple missions that are just shoehorned in to remind you, like, hey, you're technically basically in the Gulf War, in case you forgot. So this is one of them, and it is not a very good mission whatsoever. So moving on from that, we have a mission called the Cradle, which I personally really like this mission. This is probably, looking back on it, my favorite mission in the game. And what it is it's basically you going in and raiding one of Saddam Hussein's palaces in order to get into his vault, because in that vault is stored the WMD chemical weapon that you're tracking down throughout the campaign. Now, this is really the only way they tie the plot of this game together, is essentially somehow Saddam Hussein ended up with this bioweapon, and this is like, I guess, the justification for declaring war on Iraq and, you know, the WMDs and all that type of shit. But overall, it's a very, very, very loose connection. Like, Saddam Hussein himself is not even in this game. You just literally raid one of his palaces, get this chemical weapon out, and then really that's the last mention of him you ever hear throughout the rest of the campaign, man. So this again is one of those very loose connections to the Gulf War, just so they can advertise that it is a Gulf War setting. But I really do like this mission because the atmosphere is really cool. You're raiding his palace. It has cool decorations and gold statues and everything scattered all over the place. It's a really fun mission, honestly. Like, I genuinely enjoyed this mission a lot. It's very linear. It follows the same typical Call of Duty blueprint that you would imagine of shoot everything that moves in front of you and take no prisoners. So I really actually enjoyed this mission a lot, and it is personally, I would say, my favorite mission in the game. So you go and raid Saddam's palace, you get the chemical weapon, and you get the fuck out, basically, to make a long story short. So after this is probably, I don't want to say my least favorite, but it is one of the most pointless missions I have ever seen in a first-person shooter, I think, ever. And it is called Emergence. Now, this is the Call of Duty Zombies Easter egg level, where basically you're going to find information on this chemical weapon, and you fall down magically in an elevator shaft, crack your mask, and then get infected by the chemical weapon itself, which causes you to hallucinate for the next 40 minutes, and you have to make your way through this facility to collect 4 arbitrary key cards and defeat 4 zombie bosses along the way. So this is the level that you might see online where you have to fight like the zombies, and at the end of each area before you get the key card, a zombie boss spawns, and these bosses are absolutely miserable, man. Each one has their own unique gimmick, and they are literal bullet sponges to the fucking max. Like, I'm talking 10 to 20 fucking magazines of ammunition are necessary to kill these motherfuckers, and it just is weird. Like, it does not fit a Call of Duty campaign at all, and I did not enjoy it. Like, the arbitrary nature of having to collect 4 separate key cards over and over again was just such a slap in the face, and you can tell when games are wasting your time, and this mission was an absolute fucking waste of time, because towards the end of it, where your character is reunited with the rest of his squad, you know, all of a sudden the hallucinations go away, and it's basically acknowledged that none of it was actually real. So it's like the game saying, ha ha ha, fuck you. You just sat through all that shit for absolutely no reason whatsoever. So this was a complete and total filler mission slash fan service mission, which, I mean, I guess if you like that type of stuff, maybe you see it in a positive. Personally, I hate missions that make me collect, oh, go get these 3 items scattered across the environment. Go get these 4 items scattered across the environment. Like, that actually drives me insane. I hate those type of missions, so this one did not do it for me. Plus, the bullet sponge boss fights just feel so out of place in Call of Duty. Like, this is one of those moments where you really just don't even feel like you're playing a Call of Duty campaign at this point. It almost feels like you're playing a shitty zombies Easter egg. So after this mission, you play High Roller, which is the Ocean's 11 ripoff mission, and is another walking simulator mission for the most part. So for the first 15 to 20 minutes of this mission, you are going to be walking around a casino trying to collect the proper information and credentials in order to break into the casino, and I don't really want to explain it. It's very, very, very boring. I mean, I don't understand why we're at a point in a Call of Duty campaign where there are like 4 to 5 missions out of 11 11, where combat is literally a fucking afterthought. Like, I thought the reason why we were playing Call of Duty games is to shoot shit, but yeah, I mean, I guess it's fine, but you finally get the credentials to break into the casino, and you go and find like a ledger proving that Pantheon is laundering money and their connection with Saddam Hussein, like all this, I don't know, man. It's just, everything feels so fucking scattered, bro. It's like they took a bunch of themes from popular media, brought them all together, and it's like, all right, how do we make this shit stick? And they connected it in the most loosely connected way possible, just in order to, I guess, capitalize on the rule of cool. But the problem is none of it's actually fucking cool. So you get the information, you break into the vault, then you have to break out, and the mission is over. I mean, overall, this isn't a bad mission, but that 20 minutes up front is definitely a fucking slog. Not to mention the stealth segments I was not a fan of whatsoever. So after this was a mission called Ground Control, and this is the tank mission that I mentioned earlier in the review, and I actually liked this mission for the most part. I think it was actually pretty fun. The only problem is with the armored enemies, which at this point in the game are getting thrown at you like absolutely fucking crazy, to the point where it's going to drive you crazy. So that's my one negative with it. Not to mention the tank segment is so short-lived, when in reality the Gulf War was home to some of the biggest tank battles in human history, so it would have been really cool to actually see them flesh that out more. But nope, you don't get that. Instead, you get to dump 3 magazines into armored enemies for the next 30 minutes. So overall, I didn't mind this mission. I like the structure of it. I'm glad you finally got a cool vehicle segment, but it just didn't do enough right for me. So this is another one of those where they basically interject you back into the Gulf War just to remind you, like, hey, this is what you're actually doing. I know you were just at a, Italian casino last mission, but remember, we're actually fighting the Gulf War here. So this mission really exists for no reason, if you ask me. It's kind of a pointless mission, but it is one of those reminders that you are actually in the Gulf War. So after that is a mission called Under the Radar, and this is your average boss bitch stealth takedown style game a la Star Wars Outlaws, where you play as Sev and you have to infiltrate a Pantheon base in order to find out where they have the chemical weapons stored, and basically you have to maneuver your way through the base, checking off a checklist of 3 separate activities in order to lower the base's defenses and plant C4 on crucial base infrastructure and vehicles. And well, you have to sneak around, you have to talk to different people and manipulate them into doing what you want, and then you eventually gain access to the security system and find out that your CIA companion Harrow is actually a double agent, dude. Ooh, wow, so crazy. And she is actually working for Pantheon and is responsible for stealing the chemical weapon. So essentially you go and capture her and bring her in for questioning. Now, this brings on one of the most strange fucking sequences I have ever seen, not only in a first-person shooter, but especially a Call of Duty campaign. So you have 2 final missions, Separation Anxiety and Checkmate, and both are split up between each other. So the Separation Anxiety portion of the campaign is you exploring the mind of Harrow in order to discover her truth and how Pantheon actually manipulated her and how the CIA are the good guys. And if you think that there's a problem with the CIA manipulating the population and ruling over the New World Order, then you're the crazy one.
What do they fucking want, Harrow?
This is a pivotal moment in history, Woods. The United States is about to become the world's lone superpower. Do you really think an organization as corrupt, as decadent as the CIA should pull the world strings in a new world order? We'll make sure that doesn't happen.
And no, I wasn't joking, man. They literally have pro-CIA propaganda in this shit that people are crazy if they think the New World Order is actually a thing. So, the subtle propaganda is not lost on me in that regard. But basically, these are some of the most boring and just retarded segments of a COD game, I think, imaginable. Like, it's so bad, bro. Like, you're walking around collecting mirror shards as Harrow as she fights off the imaginary demons in her mind. I mean, it's like, it's so bad, bro. Like, honestly, it feels so out of place. Like, it feels more like something you would see in like a BioShock Infinite style game or a Supernatural style game versus something that's supposed to be a military shooter. But yeah, this part is where the campaign really just fucking lost me, and it really didn't already have me, so it's not really, I guess, saying too much. But yeah, it went downhill very quickly at this point. Now, the other portion of the final two missions is a mission called Checkmate, and Checkmate essentially is you defending the house or your base of operations that you have been upgrading, or in my case, not upgrading, throughout the campaign, while basically they're exploring the mind of Harrow. And you basically just fight off wave after wave after wave of armored enemies over and over and over again. This part isn't too bad. It does get very annoying having to deal with the armored enemies, and I did realize that I had a mortar, which made it a lot easier at a certain point, but overall, it kind of got repetitive very quickly, and just how fast you die and how long it takes to actually kill enemies is very irritating, especially when you just have to kill armored enemies for 30 minutes straight. But overall, not necessarily the worst part. The problem is that it constantly got interrupted by the separation anxiety portion of the campaign, where you're having to go collect mirror fragments as Harrow as she jumps around, you know, the fragments of her memory and reconstructing her past and figuring out what actually happens, which is so fucking stupid, because when she comes to the realization of what actually happened and it wasn't the CIA who killed her parents, instead it was Pantheon, she goes right back to normal and then tries to kill you all over again. So it's like she came to this realization for absolutely no reason whatsoever. It's just, the whole story is absolute fucking dog shit. So you find out after this that basically Harrow has planted the chemical weapon in the US Capitol and is going to ignite it and basically cause the entire city of DC to tear itself apart, because basically the chemical weapon has like a zombie effect essentially, which causes people to attack each other, kind of similar to the movie Kingsman. You know, if you've seen that, you kind of have an idea, where they just start killing each other. But what's kind of shitty is you never actually get to go to the Capitol. Like, it's handled over the phone. You go and take down Harrow, but supposedly the device is disabled and removed from DC and nothing actually happens. So just really weird, man. It could have been a great opportunity to have a cool mission where you have to storm the Capitol January 6th style and go and save everybody, and it could have actually been a really cool setting. You could have explored the Capitol, gone and defused the bomb, you know, mowed through your last waves of Pantheon enemies. Like, that would have actually been cool, but, you know, God forbid, man. Instead, you have the typical Makarov-esque helicopter takedown scene where you run, jump onto the helicopter, hold on, take out the guards inside, accidentally shoot the pilot, crash the helicopter, and then all of a sudden you pick up the chemical weapon canister, beat Harrow with it, it cracks, which causes you to go berserk, and you choke her out and basically drown to death as the helicopter sinks to the bottom of the lake. And that is the end of the story. And basically there is a sequel tease at the end saying that the enemy inside the CIA and the inside agents are still there, and you get a brief flash of him at the end of the credit sequence. So that is the story of Call of Duty Black Ops 6. It is a absolute clusterfuck of just random ass events and, I guess, themes from popular media franchises strung together in a desperate attempt to make what I guess you could consider to be a campaign. It is by far one of the most boring, just non-eventful, unmemorable campaign experiences I have ever had in a Call of Duty game. In fact, I had to look up plot synopsises for the first half of the campaign, because when I finished them, I had already forgotten what happened, because it was just that unmemorable. So overall, this is probably the worst Call of Duty campaign I think I have ever played personally. You know, Black Ops 3, you have been redeemed in my eyes, because I did not hate playing through that campaign nearly as much as I hated playing through this one. So I guess round of applause for Treyarch on that one. Or I guess Raven Software, because, you know, Raven Software is technically the people who make the campaigns nowadays for these modern Call of Duty titles. But overall, it just felt really, really underwhelming. And if you go and play a game like Black Ops 1, not only are you going to have way more substance to the story, not only is every single mission going to feel super fucking unique, not only are you never going to be bored at all for the entirety of the 4 to 5 hour campaign, you're going to walk away wanting to play that shit again. I don't want to touch this garbage ever again in my life, man. Like, I absolutely regret playing through it. I did not enjoy it whatsoever, and by far, this is my least favorite Call of Duty Duty campaign that I have ever played. Even Modern Warfare 3, for all its faults, had way more combat and less walk and talk segments and pseudo stealth missions than this shit had. So, not to mention a much more coherent plot. So, for all of Modern Warfare 3's faults, which, reminder, I gave that game a 3 out of 10 last year, so I am by no means a fan, you know, that at least did a better job of making a competent campaign, in my personal opinion. But I think my biggest issue with Black Ops 6 just overall is the lack of interest they showed in the actual setting for this game. There was so much you could have done with the Gulf War. Like, literally within 5 minutes of beating the game, I had a better idea for how the story should have actually played out than the actual game did, which basically would have been like the Pantheon group hijacked this US bioweapon. They transported it over to an extremist group that was being harbored by Saddam Hussein, and through some accident, the biological weapon had leaked and infected an area of Iraq, and seizing upon this opportunity in an attempt to cover it up, the US military declares war on Iraq under the pretense of weapons of mass destruction to try and go and contain the situation under the guise of a war. And in actuality, the CIA and the Black Ops are deployed to go and take out the terrorist group and Pantheon who had stolen the bioweapon, and from there on out, the events of the game play out. I think that would have been much more interesting, personally, instead of this fucking random globe-trotting, you know, just scattershot approach of taking a bunch of random shit and trying to connect it, when in reality, this game really had no connection to the Gulf War or any of the events surrounding it to any significant degree. Like, you could have taken this exact story and dropped it in any other time period, and it would have played out the exact same. So I think they did a very shitty job of actually utilizing the time period and the events surrounding the campaign, because the Gulf War at best felt like an afterthought and something they shoehorned in at the last minute in order to meet like a marketing requirement or something. So I think that's my biggest issue with the overall story, is just the complete lack of utilization of the unique setting of the game. And like I mentioned, you know, the Gulf War had some of the coolest tank battles in, you know, human history, and yet we literally got 2 minutes of driving a tank at an airport. So that was very disappointing, to say the least. But overall, man, I think this story is just absolute garbage, and definitely is the worst campaign that Treyarch has ever put out. I mean, shit, man, at least Black Ops 4 had the decency to not put out a heaping pile of shit like this. So I don't really think there's anything left to say about the story at this point, so I think it's probably time to go ahead and wrap this up, man. I mean, shit, this video is already going to be way too long at this point. So in conclusion, guys, I think it is safe to say that Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is the worst Call of Duty campaign that I have ever personally played. Now, you can agree or disagree with that sentiment. I don't really care, but in all of my years of playing Call of Duty campaigns, since Call of Duty 4, this takes the cake as the one I hated the most from start to finish. The tonal shifts, the padding, the drawn-out progression through the missions by forced stealth and boring walk-and-talk segments, to the debrief sections in between missions that you basically have to stand around for 5 minutes before you can start the next activity. Just everything about this game is just boring to me. I never got interested. Within the first hour or two, I had already mentally checked out, and that's a problem, man, because I typically love Call of Duty campaigns, even with the campaigns I don't necessarily like Modern Warfare's, I guess, reboot trilogy, like Modern Warfare 2019, Modern Warfare 2, and Modern Warfare 3. I was not this checked out that fast playing any of those 3 games, and I disliked all 3 of those campaigns. So take that as you will. This game just did absolutely nothing for me whatsoever. It felt like basically they wanted to take a bunch of different concepts from popular media franchises and just scattershot them out there and loosely connect the various different events in this attempt to weave a web of a story that is Black Ops 6. The game doesn't really take advantage whatsoever of the setting. Overall, there's not really any memorable missions whatsoever in this game, other than the ones that you remember how much you never want to fucking play again, like that one mission with the Easter egg that we discussed earlier. I won't get into spoilers in this particular segment. And on top of that, you have just genuine walking simulator missions for about 40% of this game. So if you're not a fan of forced stealth or walking around an environment collecting items, you are not going to be a fan of this game. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, Call of Duty needs to be Call of Duty again. The quick 3 to 5 hour campaign that's nonstop action, awesome over-the-top set pieces, you know, pure adrenaline pumping from start to finish. I miss those days, man. Like, I really do miss the days of firing up a Call of Duty game on day one and actually looking forward to playing the campaign before I get into the multiplayer, which multiplayer has always been the main draw for me with Call of Duty, which luckily in the case of Black Ops 6, the multiplayer, at least from what I played last night, is still amazing, just like it was in the beta. So that aspect of the game is great, so don't get me wrong on that, but I just really miss the days of Call of Duty being Call of Duty, man. They're so desperate to become like this cinematic, walking simulator, Sony-esque title, and it's like, why? You have one of the best campaign structures in the industry, and the way your game comes out allows it to be that way. People are not buying Call of Duty solely for the campaign. You can make that super fucking catered 3 to 5 hour awesome campaign experience that really you can't get anywhere else, because no one can sell a 3 to 5 hour campaign like that and expect to get $70 for it. Only Call of Duty really is in a position for something like that, because people are primarily buying it for the actual multiplayer itself and not the campaign. So I don't know why they're not capitalizing on their biggest strength, which is to provide something that honestly doesn't exist anywhere anymore, because Call of Duty gave up on doing it. They're trying to chase other people's success, and it just doesn't really make any sense to me, because I guarantee you, for as many shills out there that are going to say, oh my god, this is the greatest Call of Duty campaign in recent history, it's so amazing, I guarantee you, 3 years from now, if you asked them, what campaign would you want to replay? Call of Duty Black Ops 1 or Call of Duty Black Ops 6? The answer is going to be unanimously Call of Duty Black Ops 1, because that game stands the test of time, because it has unique missions, an amazing story, great characters, non-stop action, doesn't waste your time, and overall is an experience that will stick with you for decades. This is not one of those games. People will soy out over it at first and never fucking touch this shit again. And I guarantee you, man, just like when people were soying out over Spider-Man 2 when that game first came out, look at how the public sentiment has shifted towards that game since I made my review. So I'm just telling y'all right now, there is a lot of rose-tinted glasses right now surrounding Call of Duty Black Ops 6, and I guarantee you, in 2 to 3 years' time, when it comes to replaying a Call of Duty campaign, this is not going to be the one that you default back to, especially when you have to sit through the obnoxious stealth mechanics, the camera mission, the walk and talk segments, not to mention the schizo simulator segments toward the end of the game. So overall, man, this is really nothing special, and if I had to give this campaign a number rating, I'm giving this bitch a 2 out of 10. Do not waste your time playing this shit. Even if you can play this game free in Game Pass, go right to the multiplayer or go right to the zombies. Skip the campaign. You are not missing out on anything. It is an absolute slog. It does not get good ever. The story is absolutely nonsensical junk, and overall your time is spent basically better doing anything else, man. So yeah, 2 out of 10 for this absolute monstrosity and abomination of a Call of Duty campaign. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Have you finished the Call of Duty Black Ops 6 campaign? What did you think? If you haven't played it, are you planning on picking it up and playing the campaign, or are you just going to skip straight to multiplayer and zombies? Like, I would definitely recommend you do, but yeah, I'm always interested to hear y'all's take on whatever game it is we're talking about on whatever day that might be. So yeah, definitely sound off in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts on not only the game, but also my review. Am I objectively wrong, bro? Because I'm sure I'm gonna get a bunch of people like that, but at the end of the day, man, everybody's got an opinion, just like everybody's got an asshole, and just like assholes, opinions are just as full of shit. So yeah, it really just comes down to personal preference at the end of the day. I did not like this campaign whatsoever, but you may love it, and that's perfectly fine. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like on it. I would greatly appreciate it. This is way longer than I was anticipating. I was trying to make this like a 20 to 30 minute review, but bro, once I get started talking about a game I actually am kind of passionate about, because believe it or not, guys, I do actually love Call of Duty, which luckily the part that I love the most about Call of Duty in this instance, which is the multiplayer, is great. So that whole concern is fine, but the campaign this time around, absolute trash, which kind of seems to be the trend with every single Call of Duty campaign post Infinite Warfare. I think Infinite Warfare was the last true Call of Duty campaign, and the last Call of Duty campaign I genuinely enjoyed. But yeah, drop a like on the video if you made it this far, guys. I would greatly appreciate it. And as always, I do want to thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to check out this video, and for all the recent support as well. You guys are the fucking best, and I really do appreciate it. So with that shit said, guys, I will catch you guys next time.